First of all, thank you very much, Michael Healy-Rae, for taking part in this interview.
Yes, you're very welcome, Oscar.
As a young person into politics, I'm interested in why you got into politics. Now, I'm sure your father did play a role in you getting involved, but did you always want to become a politician? And if not, what moment did you know you wanted to be one? And
Okay,
also,
yes. Also, go on, sorry.
What advice would you give to all the young people who would like to get involved in politics?
Okay, well, I always say this because I travel to a lot of schools and I speak to a lot of students, both in national and in secondary. And the one thing I always say is to all of the students I meet, please don't ever think that, well, you have to be from a political family to be a politician. Like, I'm not talking about yourself, but just take yourself, for instance. Any young person is perfectly entitled to, if they have an interest. But to me, the big thing you would have to have an interest in is in people. So you might say, well, how would you get started? If your family wasn't involved in politics, how could you how could you get involved? And how you would get involved is start out with community groups, with for example, with the local GA, the local helping out with the tidy towns, just getting involved with people locally, local youth groups, voluntary groups. It could be St. Vincent de Paul. It could be just doing anything that would involve you in the local surroundings. And then, with regard to how did I get involved myself, I suppose, of course, it's like football being in a house or business being in a house. Politics was in our house, and maybe I was a little bit different to the rest of the people in my house, in that when my father, it's an awful thing to say, but when a TD used to die in some part of the country, my father would be drafted in to work in the by-elections, and he was a well-known director of elections. He had a certain skill set when it came to working in elections that was very successful, and he could be travelling to Donegal or to Galway or to Dublin fighting a by-election, and I'd be taken along, which would mean getting out of national school, and you could be gone to a by-election, you could be gone for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and sure, it was great. It was an excuse to go away from school, and I wasn't very academic, so the idea of working at a by-election or working in school, the election won out all the time. So anyway, that's how that happened. And but please, young people, don't think that politics is the reserve of certain people. That's rubbish. Anyone can get involved in politics. And remember, all of the politicians that you're looking at today, every one of them, myself included, you're on a cycle. You're only there for as long as the people want you. And remember, your time and my time will come, and you will be gone off of that cycle. And it could be Oscar, could be the new person representing Kerry. And that's what you want, you know?
Yeah. So just get involved, basically. That's good advice.
Exactly.
Now, I'm going to ask all the party politicians why they joined their current political party and how their party embodies their beliefs. Obviously, you aren't a party politician, so do you have any sort of ideological lens or kind of way of looking at the world you base your decisions in the Dáil on?
Yes, I have a very certain way of looking at things in the Dáil. I'm there to represent people, not parties or party policies. So I'd always weigh things up. What is for the good of the people? And it is true to say that all politics is local, but to be a national politician, you have to be elected locally. And if the day you forget the people that elect you, the day you forget the farmers, the fishermen, the unemployed, the handicapped, the people with disadvantages, the people on low incomes, medium incomes, you have to cater for everybody. You have to try and help everybody. You have to be a servant of the people. The day the politician forgets that Teachta Dála means as a messenger of the people. Some people come up here and they forget about how they actually came here. They forget why they were sent here. You're sent here to be a messenger, to be a worker, to be a person for other people. You belong to other people. And the day you forget that, Oscar, I'll give you an example. It's like you might ring me, you'd be interested in this, and you might say, well, I'm wondering, would you do an interview? Would you answer my questions? Well, I'll turn it back on you, and I'd say to you, it's not a matter of will I or will I oblige Oscar. It's the exact opposite. It's a case of, yeah, sure, like I'm working for Oscar. Like Oscar, like okay, right now you might not have a vote, right? But your parents, your family, your extended family, like you're the people in Kerry who sent Oireachtas members to Dublin to work for you. So if I was to turn around to you and say, I don't know, Oscar, like that's not important enough, I'm too busy, I can't do that. To me, that would be outrageous. Like when you ask me to do the interview, it's a case of, yes, of course I must do this. It's just a matter of, well, when will we fit it in? But like, it's not a case of, oh, well, I will do that because it suits me and I won't do the other thing. The answer is you must do everything that you practicably can do because that's your job. That's what you get paid for. So that's just to give you an example as to the way I figure out what this job is all about.
Well, fair play. You're up early in the morning to do this interview anyway. Thank you. And with COVID, last year, accredited grades was an alternative to sitting exams for subjects in the Leaving Cert. And this was welcomed by many students who, while being good, hard-working students, just mightn't be quite as good at exams, or the particular exam they sat mightn't suit them. Now, I know last night in the Dáil, you said that there needed to be clarity on this year's Leaving Cert.
Yes.
Would you say you agree with the 68% of Leaving Cert students who say that the option for accredited grade should be kept this year?
Yeah, yes, the hybrid model seems to be what the majority of students want, right? And at the end of the day, you have to go, it's like a democracy, you have to go with the majority. I appreciate very much the teachers' unions, what they have been saying. I appreciate what the teachers have been saying, but I'm listening very carefully to the students. And the students and their voices have to be heard. And at the end of the day, and I said this last night in the Dáil, what I want for young people is what will achieve the best for those people. Because of the pandemic, I don't want students to lose out. I don't want any young person to feel that because of the changes in the whole structures and the way they were studying, the way the classes were or were not performing, I don't want people to be unnecessarily left behind. So if you weigh everything up and if you size up what has gone on, and the meeting last week on the 22nd, I think, the consensus seems to be for we'll call it the hybrid model. And if that is what students, a majority of, are saying, well, that would be obviously the way to go.
And do you think this could be an opportunity to see sort of maybe permanent change? Do you think that maybe we should keep the hybrid model open for good?
But that's the most sensible statement that was ever made, because I'll put it to you this way. You should always use a bad situation to try and improve the future. So when something bad happens or something odd happens or something upsets the system, well, then maybe you should use that as an excuse to look at the system. And of course, you're right. The Department of Education should now look at this and say, right, can we improve on, because you see, we're all the same. We're all very bad, and habit is bad in a way that the system of education in Ireland was plodding along, and there was never what we'll call any type of radical overhaul. I'm sorry. And the one thing I'm not a person who comes out and says, oh, we should have changed just for change's sake. But like you've said, maybe that now's the time to stand back from this, look at it and say, right, was this model a better model? Was this a better way? Was it a fairer way to truly represent students' capabilities when it comes to doing exams? Because I must admit, I was always of this opinion myself that you could have a student that would work so hard, be very diligent, a young boy or a young girl, and then all of a sudden they're inside of a day doing an exam. And every one of us can have a bad day. And whether you're a boy or a girl, something personally could be happening in your life. It could be some situation at home. It could be a death in the family. It could be the death of a friend. It could be something personal to you that nobody might know, always inside in your own head. And on the day that you could be going in doing that exam, you could just be having a bad day. And you might not be truly able to reflect during the course of that examination the intelligence, the study, the retention, everything that you had done all along. And then all of a sudden, the majority of the results were hinged on that day, and that day might just be a bad day for you, Oscar. So, of course, you're right. Is now the time to do a look back? Of course it is. Of course it is.
I agree. Yeah, there's obviously kind of obstacles to overcome with this, but I think it's an opportunity anyway.
Yes.
When I talk to my fellow students at school, the most important political issue to most of them is the environment and climate change. You've accepted that climate change is a problem before, but it seems that a lot of the measures that the government is taking to mitigate it, you're opposing.
Yes.
First of all, do you accept that climate change is one of the biggest problems we have today, and that we all have a role to play in mitigating it? And secondly, how do you propose we deal with it?
Yes, well, I do not. You often hear politicians saying this, but I mean it. I'm delighted you asked me this question, and I'll tell you why. Right? First of all, I am not a climate change denier. I'm not. Right? And when it comes to me giving you my view, it's not as though that I'm one way and we'll say the majority of students or young people are another way. Not at all. We're all living in this planet. We all want what's best. But you see, again, it comes back to facts and about what reality is. It sounds very good and it sounds great, for instance, but just when it comes to heating, that people would say, well, there should be no such thing as any type of solid fuel because that might create smoke, that might create harm in our environment and not be good for people, right? Of course, there was certain things that had to happen. If you take smoky coal in places like Dublin, when you went into housing estates and when there was thousands of houses, and if everybody had a smoky coal fire on in the evening, and of course, you'll have to press pause for a second, Oscar.
Okay.
Because I just have to take this for a second. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
So, but at the same time, then you can't compare the west of Ireland, rural Ireland, places where people cannot come along and just go retrofitting their homes, digging up the floors and putting in underfloor heating. They might have a solid fuel stove or a range. That would be the system that they had. They were cutting turf, they were cutting timber and supplying their own fuel. You can't say to those people, well, you're wrong, you're out of step, you must change this. You just can't. In time, change will happen anyway, because the newer, younger generations won't be going to the bog. They won't be cutting timber. They'll be building homes or retrofitting. They will go into new systems. So there are certain things we can all do. But right now, then another thing. For example, if you take a good performing diesel engine in a motor car, there is nothing as environmentally friendly as a good, well-maintained diesel engine. Because if you take what it involves in producing the batteries to have, we'll say, an electric or a hybrid model car, and if you take the damage that is done to the environment in making that car, and the fact that it's not going to be affordable to people, and you see an awful lot of what has been proposed, if you stand back from it, look at it, look what it's going to mean to farmers, to fishermen, an awful lot of it is it's we were one way and now we're going too much the other way. There are measures, for example, why today when you go into a shop is everything that's inside that shop wrapped so many times in plastic? There is no need whatsoever for it. So there are simple measures that we're ignoring, and at the same time we're pushing everybody down this road of this massive expense. And you see, young people, they haven't started out in the journey of life when it comes to paying bills, right? They're not paying the ESB bill. They're not paying the road tax. They might be buying the car yet, but they will be very soon. And when I say that I'm worried for young people. I'm worried for the Oscars of the world who will have to buy a car, who will have to have a job, who will have to have a house. and like whether that's renting accommodation or buying it. It actually doesn't make a difference because it's all going to go up because of what is being proposed. So yes, we have to protect the climate, 100%. We have to protect the future of the climate, but we also have to protect the people that are living in the climate now. And we have to make sure that the young Oscars of the world will be able to do what all the rest of us did. And that is have a job, transport yourself around this world, whether it's going out foreign. Like, because I mean, what are people saying? So I mean, one of the worst things that's out there this minute are the planes in the sky. What do we want to do? So tell all the planes stop. You can't put the planes up into the sky on a battery. So like, we have to be sensible about this when we're talking about farmers, and when we're talking about reducing, for instance, the national herd. Like, can you tell me why should the national herd in Ireland, which is small, be reduced at a time when in South America they can increase by 25 million head of cattle? Like, do you know, there's no point in making fools out of ourselves either. And like, the very students who might be saying, we demand change and we demand it now. Well, I let them see what the world will be like when they'll be living in it, and when they'll be trying to pay the ESB bill, and when they'll be trying to pay the mortgage, and when they'll be trying to pay the rent, because they won't be at home always. They won't have parents always. And I want to ensure that the world that they will be living in will be livable in.
I suppose, like just a while ago, we were talking about that in kind of the face of big problems, there's opportunities, and that we need to overcome those problems. You don't think that we should deal with it any more aggressively in certain sectors, maybe? And I mean, obviously, I know with sort of agriculture, you're saying cutting the national herd there, but there is kind of, other than maybe cutting the national herd, there are steps that we can take that would make agriculture greener.
But you see, Oscar, that's where people are missing the point. What you're saying sounds great, right? But farmers are already after doing so much. I mean, a number of years ago, farmers didn't have slatted sheds. They didn't have collection areas for slurry like what they have today. The methods of spreading slurry were completely different 5 and 10 years ago to what they are today. Farmers have what I would call really improved their operations. They've done everything that they can do to improve the way they farm. And they're continuing to do that. But again, you can't have a tractor that's operated on a battery. It's just not that actual piece of machinery is not there yet. So whether it's pig production, whether it's the production of beef, whether it's the production of milk, these people have invested an awful lot in doing what they were told by governments, by doing what they were told by Europe. And they can't come along now and have the rug pulled out from underneath of them. Like a person who's milking 100 cows or 50 cows or 150 cows, they worked very, very hard to get to that stage. A person who might have had a small number of animals long ago and then improved and bought more land and you know, progressed, they can't have the rug be pulled out from underneath of them. And like, we need food. So what are we going to say? That we'll be the goody boys of Europe. We'll stop producing food. We'll minimize everything. And what we'll do then is we'll just import it. That doesn't make sense. Remember what the government did with ESB. They thought it was a good idea to do away with the production of ESB from turf. And what are we doing? We're importing turf. And like, we're importing briquettes. For God's sake, it's crazy. If you realized exactly what is happening, you would say that an awful lot of what is happening is stupid. And it is stupid beyond belief. And like, when you see that fact that Ireland is running dangerously close of running out of ESB, right? And like, that will happen. It will happen. And like, the government thought it was a good idea to shut down Moneypoint and Tarbert. And they did. And they stopped them. What did they have to do, Oscar? They had to open them up again. Because if they didn't, you and me wouldn't be having this conversation, because there'd be no power in the electricity outlet that we're plugged into. So, I mean, do students want that? Do they want us to have no ESB? Do they want us to be in the dark? I know they don't.
Well, I appreciate that. But I suppose, like, there are so many opportunities with renewables, like for example, we could have offshore wind farms that could produce a lot of energy. If we had that, I think there wouldn't really be any excuse to, still be cutting turf and all sorts of stuff like that. Importing it either, I don't. If we had that, I don't think we should be importing it either. So.
But you see, Oscar, of course, what you've just said is correct. But the government didn't do that. What the government did was they shut down Bornemona without having an alternative in place. And why did they do that? They reacted to we'll say, public concern and the want for a greener way of living. But they did so without thinking it out properly. What you just said was perfect. You said if we had more offshore energy. Sure, if we had, of course, then you could use that and you'd have another source of energy. But we're telling people use more ESB. Please use ESB to have underfloor heating. Use ESB to charge your motor car to have an electric vehicle. But did we give them more ESB? We didn't. We cut it out. We shut down the place, but we had to open them again. And why? Because the government made a cock up. And they made a mess of it. And when I was telling them not to do what they did, they still went ahead and did it. But now they had to undo it. And the reason they had to undo it, because the goddamn lights would be out this minute if they didn't open up Money Point, if they didn't open up Tabard. So, have I been proven right in what I have been saying? I have. But that doesn't mean I'm a climate change denier. That doesn't mean to say that I don't agree with what you've just said. But you see, what you've said and what the government have done are two completely different things.
Do you agree with us taking a more sort of aggressive kind of stance on maybe investing in renewables so that we don't need the fossil fuels? Or do you think we should keep going ahead with the fossil fuels? Because I agree with you that we shouldn't be taking away the fossil fuels without replacing them with renewables in the first place. But do you think that we should be really focusing on renewables now?
But again, the whole point about this is that's going to happen naturally. The people who are coming into this world now are like yourself, that's here and established. Those people are not going to be going to the bog every summer. They're not going to be out with chainsaws cutting timber. So this is another point that the government have missed. You don't have to wave your finger at people and force people to change the way they live, because by a generational change, the way people live will change anyway. And the future will be a majority of young people going to a switch on the wall and turning on the switch for whatever they want. That is going to happen more and more. And the people like me, being blunt about it, are going to die and will be gone out of the way. And our way of living will be gone with us. And a small amount of younger people might retain, we'll say, the traditional ways of living, but an awful lot won't, Oscar. So you're going to have a natural evolution anyway.
We'll move on to healthcare now, I suppose. In recent months, the situation at University Hospital Kerry has been worsening, with a litany of various issues rearing their heads, including staff shortages and a lack of support. And on a more local level for me, my mother works as a nurse in a hospital here in Dingle, and they have a whole ward there that's never opened due to lack of staff. Now, as everyone knows, these problems are not unique to these hospitals, and they're a common theme in the healthcare system as a whole. What do you think should be done to improve the situation of the frontline staff and the healthcare system as a whole right now and for the future?
Okay, well, I tremendously respect the work that is done, starting off first of all with community hospitals. If you take the hospital you're speaking about, Dingle, I can remind you, you weren't born when this happened, but I know the person who stood up at a Southern Health Board meeting many, many years ago and was the first person to say we needed a new hospital in Dingle to replace the hospital that was there. And that was Michael Healy-Rae, my father. And he started a campaign at that time that Dingle should have a new community hospital, as he did in ensuring that we had a new community hospital in Kenmare. I want to tell you a thing that you mightn't know, but for example, your mom would. A Minister for Health one time came out and made an announcement. And I'll tell you exactly what we were losing. This will tell you how you can't rely on governments. Kenmare Community Hospital, Killarney District Hospital, Carasiveen Community Hospital, Dingle Community Hospital were all to close. There was 2 more hospitals in West Cork that were to close. And the reason was the government at the time in the Department of Health said the regionalisation of healthcare was the way to go. Now, everybody knows that that model was wrong. It was stupid. It was only with massive resistance at the time that we held on to what we call then our old hospitals, and it ensured that we were building new ones. And thankfully, we're going to get a new community hospital in Killarney also in the near future. But so you in hospital care, obviously, when it comes to the health of people, if you can keep a person at home for longer, that's better. The next thing is the community hospital, the nearest hospital to them. And for example, when you talk about Dingle, I deal with horrendous situations every day of the week, as I have already this morning speaking to a person from Dingle whose elderly parent was in the hospital in Tralee, should be going back to Dingle, to your mom, and instead there's no place for them to go. They're on a waiting list to go to Dingle. And like you said rightly, what have we got in some of the places where we should have had beds? We've offices in Dingle instead of having beds, which is crazy. And that elderly person that I was dealing with earlier this morning will be faced with having to be someplace like Killarney, Kenmare, and you may as well send the person from Dingle to outer Mongolia as to send them there, because it's so far away from a visiting point of view that the older person won't be meeting somebody that they know. They'll be in a strange place. Even the way people talk, there's a different, like for a Dingle person to be inside Kenmare, no disrespect to Kenmare, it's the wrong place for them to be. A Dingle person wants to be in Dingle, a Kenmare person wants to be in Kenmare, and a Killarney person wants to be as near as they can be to their home. And that's what we should be aiming to achieve. With regard to Dingle, yes, they keep saying it's a staffing shortage. Well, I have the answer for you, Oscar. If they paid our student nurses properly, and if they paid them and gave them the same conditions, we wouldn't have our young, beautiful, trained young people going to England and going to the rest of Europe and going down to Australia. They'd be staying at home. But they don't see staying at home as an option. And that's where we're failing as a state. That's where we're failing as a Department of Health.
And I completely agree with all that. But you were just talking about how when they were setting up the HSE, the healthcare system was regionalised. And now with Sláinte Care, they're going back and all that.
Yes.
Do you think the government is doing enough to implement Sláinte Care?
Well, I'll answer that for you this way. The old Southern Health Board that was there long ago, I was a member of that board. That board had teeth, because when it came to budgets, for example, we as politicians had a say in budget. We had a say in how the whole health system was run. When I used to attend meetings, you were sitting down at a meeting, sitting alongside you could be a consultant that could have been from CUH or from any one of the hospitals in the region. You were dealing with people of different types of expertise. And what did the government at that time then do? Said, oh, we'll shut down the Southern Health Board and we'll take the politicians out of the system, because they said it would be great, get rid of the politicians. So then they made the HSE, and there was no politicians on it. They were long realizing, oh my goodness, this is failing, this is a disaster. They brought back in the politicians. And what are they doing now? Looking at the whole model again and saying, no, it should be more like what we actually had. So again, a stupid decision taken by stupid politicians at the time who thought that they were doing this great thing. And remember our conversation earlier about the climate. And the proof that just because politicians do things sometimes, it doesn't mean that they're right. Politicians don't have a monopoly on being right. And of course, the dragging of the feet with regard to changing the delivery of healthcare is, of course, disastrous. But the reason it is because healthcare there's more and more money being thrown at it. And at the same time, the service is becoming less and less and less. And that's obviously not good.
So basically, politicians that have more kind of more, or so I suppose public representatives should be more involved in it, I suppose, what you're saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
like with the war, we had a better healthcare service.
Mm.
When we had the old Southern Health Board system, that actual structure, that was the structure. That
Yeah.
was the right way to handle a healthcare service.
Mm. And now moving on to COVID, we've seen many variants of COVID since the start of the pandemic, which has prolonged the pandemic. And these variants have predominantly come from poorer countries in the world due to their low vaccination rates, and many of them can't get the vaccine. And now, as a response to this, the WHO, the UN, doctors, nurses, academics, everyone basically across the world have all made it crystal clear we need a TRIPS waiver, or kind of a patent waiver, as a first step in the scaling up of global manufacturing and access to vaccines for poorer countries. Would you support the TRIPS waiver?
Okay, let me word it through this way. I said it already in this interview that when things happen, you have to try and use those opportunities to improve the way you operate. So lessons have to be learned out of how we dealt with this pandemic. Lessons have to be learned as to how we'll deal with future situations like this. And rather than now everybody breathe a sigh of relief and saying, well, thanks be to God, we got over that. Of course, in a worldwide scale, we have to look at what would we do tomorrow if something new happened? What could we do to improve the delivery of whatever would be needed if something would be needed to react to that situation at that time? So, of course, there's a big job of work to be done. And whatever that involves, whether it's patent waivers or whatever, right? Of course, we should look at that and work at it, and people should be tasked with that job immediately.
And now, living in the Gaeltacht, the Irish language is very important to many here. And around a year ago, a housing estate was opened here in Dingle by the name of Porkin and a Glass, and around 30% was meant to be allocated to Irish speakers. Not only was the name spelled incorrectly, it doesn't really translate into anything of any meaning, but also when a well-known local Irish speaker was asked in an interview about whether they checked whether people could speak Irish or not, he said he was asked if he could speak Irish. The question was put in English, and once he responded with yes, that was it, he was passed. Do you feel sometimes that pretending to care about the Irish language is a bit of a box-ticking exercise, and a bit more respect could be shown for it? And do you think we should deal with it more aggressively?
Well, first of all, I believe very much in the retention of the Gaeltachts. The work that Banantees have done over the years in catering for students, the whole experience of Banantees, having been to an Irish college myself and give you a summer there, I really have a true appreciation of the work that they do. When I'm doing an interview like this, I don't ever like bringing what I'd call the nitty gritty of politics into it. But then there's sometimes a person has to tell the truth and has to say what they know. Fine Gael, for example, seem to have had an awful problem over the years with the whole Irish language. They wanted to do away with Gaeltachts. They wanted to do away with the structure of Banantees. They wanted to really, what I would call, undermine the Irish language and the tradition of the way of living in Gaeltacht areas. Why they wanted to do that, to be honest, is a question that they must answer themselves. I'm not responsible for their behaviour. But I know that people from Dingle and from other Gaeltacht areas in County Kerry always highlighted this to me, that what problem had the Fine Gael party with the Irish language? Why did they dislike it so much? Why did they want to undermine it? Why did they want to starve it of resources so much? And what you've seen in recent years, in my opinion, is lip service to the Irish language. If they really are truly committed to the Irish language and the culture and the heritage that involves, well, then you have to adequately resource it. And to keep our Gaeltachts vibrant from an economical point of view, whether it's job creation, whether it's the educational side of things, the resources have to be put into it. And I would like to see that happening in this and future governments.
And this might be a bit out of our scope here in Kerry, but we're all the one island, and as a young person, it's looking increasingly likely we'll see a united Ireland in my lifetime.
Yes.
In your opinion, is it time to prepare for a border poll? And how would you vote if there was a referendum on the matter?
Okay, well, first of all, when you ask a person what way are they going to vote on a referendum, it's very hard to say what you'll do with regard to a referendum, that the scope of or exactly what that would entail is not clear. So, first of all, I'm not going to answer that question, and I always answer every question, but you can't answer a purely hypothetical question. But we'll say in the overall scheme of things, look at it from your eyes, from what I call a younger person's eyes. Are you right in what you're saying, that this will inevitably happen in your lifetime? Yes, of course, I can see that happening. But when I say see it happening, see what happening? Because what exactly will happen? Will it be a simple matter of a poll asking people's opinion and then taking direction from the people? That is probably what will happen. But again, we're speaking hypothetically, and the way I answer that whole issue is that will evolve, that will happen, and it'll happen in its own time, in its own due course. And all we can do is deal with that situation as it arises.
And the pandemic has hit us all hard, especially workers and small businesses. With the charity Oxfam reporting that Ireland's 9 billionaires increased their wealth by 58% to nearly 50 billion euros over the pandemic, while the vast majority of people actually got poorer. Do you think it's time we had a discussion about implementing a wealth tax here in Ireland in order to redistribute that wealth to workers and small businesses and invest in public services and infrastructure?
Well, during the last 2 years, one of the biggest problems and worries and concerns that I had was trying to help and assist small business. Because to me, the backbone of Ireland, if you take the agricultural situation, that's where people create employment for themselves, whether it's fishermen or whether it's farmers. Then you have small businesses, and small business could be the person, the man or the woman who creates this thing, one job that might be for themselves. Then they might get bigger and expand. It could be for a family member or for a neighbor. They have a second job or a third job. But the people who create that type of employment, the 2, the 3, the 5, the 10 jobs, they're the backbone of Ireland, whether it's in hospitality, whether it's in building, whether it's in whatever facet of life. But those people have to be minded and protected. The one thing when I hear politicians from the far left, and it's like as though they want to attack people who create employment, because I see people jumping up and down here inside the Dáil, and you'd be fit to jump out the window when you hear what some of them what comes out of their mouths. They stand up and they say, "I'm here talking for the working man." These politicians never did a day's work in their lives. They wouldn't get out of our way if we met them on the corridor because it would take too much effort. And here they are jumping up and down talking about the working man just because they believe that to be populist and popular. You need people in Ireland that will create that one job for themselves, or the 5 jobs, or the 10 jobs. They are terribly important. If there are another category of people in the country, and that's what you'd call the very, very wealthy people, we need those people as well, because they create employment. We need to ensure that we don't frighten away people from living here who have money, because we want them to be here. We want whatever work they create to be here. We want them to pay taxes here because we want their tax. So you have to be very careful sometimes about what you wish for, and that in trying to do good, that you wouldn't do harm. So let me word it to you in this way. We don't want to listen to people from, we'll call it the extreme left, who are all the time talking about the working man, but they know nothing about what it takes to keep people working, because they know nothing about work. They never created a job themselves. They never paid a man or a woman on a Friday evening. They know nothing about the reality of business. So you have to be very careful about what we wish for.
I suppose when I'm talking about the wealth tax, definitely not talking about hitting small businesses or anything anyway. But and I understand that we don't want to kind of disincentivize people to come here and create employment. But like their wealth has the super wealthy, their wealth has increased so much over the pandemic. And before the pandemic, we had lots of, there was lots of employment here, lots of kind of investment here. So if, I'm not saying we go back we take all of that, like 58% increase that they took, but do you think, I mean, even if we had a 1.5% wealth tax on kind of wealth above 4 million, that would increase 4 billion. So I think that, even if it's just a wealth tax on the very wealthy, that there would be lots of opportunities there.
Yes. Well, again, if something could be arrived at that wouldn't stop people of staying here, that would be the big concern, and that's what we just have to be very, very careful of. Do you know? Oscar, I'm really coming under pressure because I've speaking time in a while, so
all right, okay.
Once the Dáil starts, and I've stuff to prepare and everything, so I'm falling behind with phone calls and everything. Yeah.
Just one last question. So I'd just like to ask, despite the endless demands, do you enjoy being a politician, and do you see yourself staying for as long as you can?
Well, okay, let me answer this question. The people who will decide whether I'll be a politician in the future is Oscar. The future voters, the present voters. I can say to you, oh yes, I'm going to stay in politics. I don't have the right to say that, but I'll word it to you this way. Yes, I would like to be given the opportunity to stay in politics. I would be humbly grateful to the Oscars of the world if they would give me the opportunity to continue. And again, it isn't that people might agree with everything I do. I do my best. I try to represent people in the broadest, most honest, most fairest, and hardworking way that I can. I believe that I give a good service. I know I put my heart and soul into it from early in the morning till late at night, 7 days a week. So being a politician from Kerry, I think I have a lot to offer. I believe that I have a lot of work to do on behalf of the people of Kerry and the country in the future. So the answer is yes, I'd like to be here for longer. I still hope to think that I'm what we call considerably young enough to stay on for more time. So I hope I'll be given the opportunity. And then, like I say, the wheel, when I will fall off of that wheel and not be there, that young, fresh people will take over, and I'm sure they will do an excellent job at that time.
Well, listen, I really appreciate your time, Michael. Thanks for taking part.
No bother in the world, and I wish you good luck with your other interviews with the other Oireachtas members, and I hope that your project is a success, and all the very best. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, Oscar.
Bye.
Bye-bye.